Hey guys, it's Tiffany. So I'm going to start a new series where I give you some information about how to tell between different types based purely on visual indicators. Um, First, let's run through just a few of the things that you can look at if you're trying to judge someone's type just by looking at them. I'm not going to read through all of these, but you can pause and read them if you like. And you notice that I didn't say what means what type. And that's because unfortunately it's a little bit more complicated than that. Generally, several types tend to share certain features, and it's more of a distribution thing rather than like a hard and fast tell. Okay. Posture, I highlighted in blue things that I find personally the most useful. So how erect someone's spine is, whether they're hunching, leaning, and so on, their shoulders and neck, whether they're all hiked up next to their ears, whether they're level or leaning, whether they're curved forward or pulled back. And also someone's fingers are a really good way, a good thing to look at when you're talking about type, both how they hold their fingers at rest, as well as how they use them in gestures and so on. And you'll see that in gestures, I also included hand movements, is something that I find really useful. And we'll talk about that for two types today. Eyes are very important. The posture of the eyes, how someone holds their eyes, as well as the gaze, where they're looking and how they change their gaze, are some of the most important things that you can find. The mouth is also extremely important. Which of their teeth are visible, if any, how they hold and use their upper lip, as well as how they keep their lips when they're resting, when they're listening or not talking. Those things are very important. Facial expressions. Voice is very important for type. What people say is not that important when it comes to type. So it can be hard to just listen to the voice and not pay attention to the content, but we'll talk about that a bit. All right, so those are the things that uh, are primarily what I consider. There might be some I forgot to list. So now this is how this is going to work. I have four kind of random ENTPs lined up for you to see. And then I've got four kind of random ISFPs, just whoever came to my mind first. So we're going to talk about ENTPs, what I notice when I look at ENTPs, and then what I notice when I look at ISFPs. And then the last three people are going to be mystery people. And we're going to see if you can take some of the things I point out to you about ENTPs and ISFPs and see if you can type them. They're either ENTP or ISFP. So we'll see if this helps you out. All right, so we're going to start with Stephen Strait. He's an ENTP. He was an actor in the TV show The Expanse. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to turn the volume down real low because remember, it doesn't really matter what he says. Any type can say anything. There are some, slight uh, uh, differences that you might notice between people, but it's a really not a great way to type people, just listening to the words they say. So I'm going to turn the volume real down low, and then I'm just going to play this video, and I'm going to point out to you the things that I notice about what he does that make me able to type him as ENTP. So here we go.
Film, big setting. So,
all right, so the first thing I notice about his mouth is that his lower lip is very relaxed. It looks full, which is very common, especially with ENs. I notice that his spine is not on the same line as his head. Notice if it were, it would just, his head would be going straight up here, but instead he's cocked his head to the side and it's out of line with the spine. That also is very common with intuitives, especially ENs. I noticed that his arms are relaxed and leaning on things. So he's got at least, I don't know, 2 points of contact here. He's got his elbow leaning on something and his hand leaning on something, which is especially common for people who don't have great balance. So again, we're talking about intuitives, especially ENs. Let's watch some more.
Could you talk a little bit about how
Okay.
Did that make it sort of easier for you to understand the character and the characters in the film and kind of relate to that?
Yeah, for sure.
Did you notice how quickly, I'm going to turn the sound up just a little bit so you can hear the interviewer. He answers the interviewer almost instantly. ENs, especially ENPs, are going to be the fastest to answer a question.
The characters in the film and kind of relate to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
You can't really answer a question much faster than that unless you're interrupting, which is also something extroverts do, but yeah, he did listen to the end and then he responded right away, so that lets you know he's an extrovert, especially likely an EN. Also, I'm noticing his eyes here, that he has the lower eyelid kind of squinched up. And that's something that I notice a lot in intuitives, especially, I would say, NFJs and NTPs are where you're going to see that the most. Also, a bit of the eyebrows coming together there is an intuitive thing.
Relate to that?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely knew the dynamic.
And I want you to see how, oh, that's an ENTP thing right by the nose right there. I don't know how to describe it. Something about this muscle movement is an ENTP thing. Just the specific muscle hiked up when they're talking, so that you see it's going to cause this shape of the lip there. I'm not going to be able to explain why all of these things are associated with different types, just that I noticed that and that's what it makes me think. That's the best I'm going to be able to do for some of them. I want you to notice how even when he's talking, when he's thinking, whatever he's doing, how his lips are very relaxed. He's not tensing, he's not making them tight or pursing them out like a kiss. They're just relaxed, and that is probably the most prototypical ENTP thing you can have.
To that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Just no matter what he's saying, his lips are very... Okay, so here we have him chewing on his nails. I mean, of course, anyone can do that, but to do it in the middle of talking in an interview shows a type that has less self-control and self-awareness, especially of their body. So we're talking about EPs, especially those with low sensing, so ENPs. This eyebrow thing is an ENTP thing. It's maybe ENFP too. It's a kind of a sense of surprise. Okay, so now I want to direct your attention to his gaze. I want you to look at how many times he changes the position he's, like the direction he's looking in a short period of time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you see he's constantly changing where he's looking. And that's very indicative of strong NE, especially ENs. You'll see that, especially ENPs, but any EN, you'll see that quite a lot. Okay, let's not spend too long on any one person. Let's move on to our next ENTP, who is Grimes, a singer, former girlfriend of Elon Musk. And if you know anything about psychoanalytic structures, Grimes is detached, which means that her personality type is going to be a bit muted compared to people of later structures, but there's still plenty of indication for what her personality is. So let's go ahead and see.
We are becoming cyborgs. Like our brain.
Okay, so the first thing I want you to listen to her voice. Do you hear the lisp in her voice?
We are becoming cyborgs. Like our brains are fundamentally changed. Everyone who grew up with electronics.
Sorry about the quality drop there, but if you can hear that she has a lisp, that's extremely common with ENTPs. Basically, a strong lisp like that is almost certainly an ENTP or maybe like an ENTP subtype person. Of course, not 100%, but it is extremely indicative. The reason is, again, the relaxed lips, and ENTPs often relax their mouth so much that their tongue kind of protrudes forward through their teeth, and that is what creates the sound of a lisp, is the tongue coming forward through the teeth. So that's a very strong indicator of ENTP. It can happen in other ENs as well, but especially ENTPs, you hear it the most. I'm sure you're also going to notice her gaze change a lot if you pay attention to that.
We are becoming cyborgs. Like, our brains are fundamentally changed. Everyone who grew up with electronics.
It sucks that the quality keeps dropping, but one thing I'd like you to notice is that even when she's doing gestures, here, maybe I don't know if that'll make a difference. Even when she's doing gestures that involve both of her hands, there's a real lack of symmetry. So one hand will be higher than the
We
other.
are becoming cyborg.
I can go frame by frame, and you can see that even though she's doing the same gesture with both hands, that they're not actually exactly symmetrical. So again, that goes to the lack of body coordination and low SI that you find with ENs, especially ENTPs. Let's see what else we can get out of her. So there's not a lot of, how would you say, commitment in the movements. There's a lot of like hesitancy and uncertainty. Watch how she moves her arm here again. She like pulls it up and let's see. There, and then she like goes down, but it's not a smooth single movement. It's a composite of several different movements, and it's neither like one tough movement, nor is it like a smooth flowing thing. It's kind of like stop and start and a little bit hesitant. And if you watch ENTPs, ENPs in general, you're going to notice that tendency to move a lot, but in a kind of stopping and starting and like unpredictable, imprecise way. Notice her eyes there. Let's go back a bit. Notice her eyes, that kind of rolling, roll, stop, roll, stop, roll, stop. That's an anything. Yeah, that's a strong any indicator. It looks like here she might be shifting, and I mean, look at look at the way she's sitting here. I mean, okay, again, she's detached, so some of the things she does, detached people don't have a strong body coordination is something we talked about with intuitives, but I'm talking about more in the sense of like understanding their body as a whole. So the idea that your body is a whole object where all the pieces are interconnected and affect each other, that's the kind of body coordination that detached people don't have. So they can often end up sitting in strange positions. They're not the only ones. But ENTPs, ENs, are also going to have, because they get uncomfortable, they get uncomfortable with how they're sitting because they don't have a strong internal sense of where their body is. So they'll often stretch or go into these kind of strange positions. I mean, she's not like doing it on purpose, she's not like, look at how I can move my arms, she's trying to pay attention to the interview, but her arms are uncomfortable for whatever reason, so she's doing this amusing thing. I think that is going to be less common with an ENFP because they are more aware of the fact that other people are watching them. They have stronger FE, so they're not going to be as likely to do in public something super strange like that. Notice again how we have the spine and the head that are not aligned with each other. We have the floppity lips. And again, the weird movements, the rocking back and forth is a definite strong ENP fidget. Okay. A lot of repetition of gestures. I mean, she's shaking her head so much here. It's not a single time for emphasis. It's like the whole time she's talking, the whole time she's thinking, she's shaking her head, and that's an EP thing. Especially ENP, because there's not a lot of strong unconscious control of the body movements. It kind of happens by itself. All right, this is Richard Feynman, very famous scientist, ENTP. And you can tell right away, if you look at his face here, he's got a very classic ENTP kind of Joker face. And I would say if I just saw this still, I would say that's 100% an ENP, could be ENFP. Of course, if you know about him, you know there's not much else he could be but ENTP. But this Joker face, I don't know exactly how to call it, like in a super polite way, but it's the laughing eyes, the way the lips are curled up with the little nose lines here.
As it seems, we're used to get, hot and cold.
Notice his body. First of all, look at how like hunchety his shoulders are. They are not straight back, good posture, right? This guy is melting into this chair. And the interesting thing to notice is even at how slouched he is, he's still uncomfortable because he's constantly wiggling his fingers here. His knees are wiggling.
If they jiggle more, it corresponds to
shifting
hotter.
his body. He did here.
The
Shifting his
speeds
body
that the atoms are
up
jiggling,
and down.
if they jiggle
His
more, it corresponds to hotter.
shoulders are
And colder is
moving.
jiggling less. So if you have a bunch of atoms,
And again, with the asymmetrical gestures, you notice even though he's using both of his hands to gesture, they're not at the same line. They're not in the exact same position. And that's, again, very typical with ENs. Adjusting his clothing there, feeling uncomfortable with clothing, uncomfortable with the temperature is a common ENTP thing.
and colder is jiggling less. So if you have
You'll notice that his facial expressions, and you can see that if you go back and look at the other ones too, that they don't change very quickly. Okay, he tends to hold
a bunch of atoms,
a facial expression for quite a long time, despite how much he's shifting, scratching, adjusting himself.
and the atoms of
That's an indicator that he's not a feeler, basically, because feelers are much more likely to have micro expressions that change moment
jiggling
to
a great
moment.
deal in the coffee, and they bounce.
I don't know how to describe this in terms that everyone can understand, but he's moving his hands like a mad scientist. When you talk about a mad scientist who's very excited and doing these kind of gestures with their hands, like this, you see how they're kind of, they're not tense and intentional in every movement the way like an ISTJ might do. They're floppy. It's like he's paying attention to move his hands, right? To move his wrists, rather, is what he's paying attention to move. And the rest of his hands are just kind of going along with that without controlling every aspect of it. Of course, he's describing some scientific principles, so he's trying to illustrate it. But the fact that he's illustrating it with these jerky, repetitive movements is another thing you're going to see with ENTPs. Yeah, we got more of this kind of Joker face. I tried to include a few people from different generations because you're going to notice a lot of changes in generation as well, and you don't want to be thrown off by that. If you notice how he uses, like here, he was probably talking about something inflating or going up. He uses his chest to show what he's talking about. That's a common intuitive thing. When you're thinking about a concept, it kind of manifests itself in your body. That's something that's very common with intuitives, especially extroverted intuitives, because everything extroverts do is just more physically. Oh, there's a good. I was about to turn on from him, and then we got those eyes. So you'll notice he's mostly got these smiley eyes, very ENP, especially ENTP, smiley eyes. But when that's a big one, okay? Like the transition is what's important here, from the typical smiley eyes to a big dramatic display with the eyebrows all the way up, the eyes all the way open, is something you're going to see again, especially with ENs, especially with ENPs. And I think, since he's not doing it constantly back and forth, since it's an occasional single emotional expression, you're going to see that mostly with ENTPs. All right, and the last ENTP I wanted to look at for this video is Monica Potter. She's an actress. She was in the TV show Parenthood. All right, so, oh, that sound, okay. So the interesting thing here is this guy who made this video put a compilation of her walking out. And I'd like you to notice, no dissing, but how poor her balance is. She is constantly doing micro movements with her body to try to stay upright on her feet. Notice when she comes around the corner here, how much she's leaning to look out ahead of her. That's in anything because they want to see what they're anticipating, right? She's not standing straight up. She's leaning this way. You're also going to notice that her arms and hands flop. So when she's swinging them, that she's not making every choice consciously, that the only, semi-conscious choice is to swing her arms, and then everything that's happening with her wrists and her hands is just the consequence of physics. Letting your body just flop around like that is a very EN thing. Okay, so let's see. Let's watch and see what things I noticed. I noticed her stepping there was really quite awkward, short, and like she's having a hard time walking in heels, which for an actress is probably something she has quite a lot of practice in. Not anyone can look awkward in heels if they never walk in heels, but an actress who's constantly on shows and red carpets and stuff who needs to be in heels, who's still having issues with it, I would say they're almost certainly ENTP or INFJ would be the two types that I would expect that the most in. Again, the constant twitching. Now she has made an effort to improve her posture. You see, she's trying to sit up straight, and yet you notice that her neck and shoulders have a lot of tension in them because that's an awkward thing for her to do, to sit up straight. And still the spine and the head are not quite aligned. She's often leaning it kind of this way rather than straight like you would expect the head to be. I don't know how to explain it. She's like showing us the underside of her chin somewhat. There's a good EN moment, especially ENTP, this kind of like awkward double scratch. Do you see it? She like puts her hand to her head. First of all, that's already unintentional. But then she like does it twice. Because I think probably what's going on there is she's thinking like, oh, I shouldn't be scratching my head. Unconsciously maybe. And then like thinking about it makes her redo the gesture. Okay, I'll try not to speculate too much on reasons, but just on what you can notice. So again, she's sitting kind of weirdly because she's not comfortable. Changing positions constantly. Changing eyes constantly. Okay, so that right there, how she looked down and then looked up really quick, that's definitely an extrovert. Especially, I don't know why, but it's something associated with ETPs. How she looks away and then looks very quickly back up at the presenter one more time. Looks away and then looks very quickly like that and turns her head to look at him. That's something I see very common in both ENTPs and ESTPs. And notice how she's fidgeting here with her hands, her ring, EP thing. Especially ENP. Facial expressions not changing very frequently. Oh, that's a cute little look. How she looks up with her eyes here, full of innocence. If I just saw that moment on its own, where she looks kind of down, she looks pretty serious, and then she looks up full of innocence in a conversation. Yeah, I would say either ENP or maybe ISP. Those are the only two that I would expect to look like that from. Okay. All right, so let's stop with the ENTPs here. If you want me to do this more with the ENTPs, if you feel like I didn't give enough, let me know. I'm trying to find the right balance between giving a lot of information and not going on, indefinitely. So if you'd like me to do again with more ENTPs, let me know. Let's talk now about ISFPs.
I am Lauren Mayberry.
All right, so the first ISFP I have here is Lauren Mayberry from the band Churches. All right, so the first thing I notice is that she has like, it looks like she's peering directly into my soul. She's intentionally talking to me. So that's definitely a feeler thing, and it's also quite often a sensor thing. I notice her body is very slim. It would be very hard to have a body like this unless you were an IP. It's slim and what I like to call noodly. So there's not a lot of like sinew that you're seeing. You don't really see her bones very much. You know, you're not seeing a lot of like muscle definition here. So that's very common in IPs. You can sometimes see it in younger EPs as well. All right, let's see. One thing that's going to complicate some of the visual typing is that almost all introverted actors and musicians and so on that I can have videos of, they're almost all creative subtypes. So they're going to have a few more of those kind of EP gestures than you would get with just like random people off the street. And she's actually ENTP creative. That's her subtype, is ENTP. So you will see a little bit more of those kind of EP gestures, but it's still very easy to differentiate between the types once you get used to it. So let's see. So one thing I notice right away that's very ISFP is the way that she purses her lips in here. I wonder if you can see this. Can you see this muscle right here at the edge of her lips, how she purses that in? That's an extremely characteristic ISFP thing. A culture you can notice that in a lot is French people. If you look at how French people speak, and it's because French culture is ISFP culture. So it's like kind of overlaid on top of any French person is an element of ISFP. That pursing lips and the edges of the lips looking thin and the center looking pushed out. That's a strong ISFP thing. The single eyebrow raise in a not humorous context is very FI Dom, so IFP. She's not laughing. She has no Joker face. Do you see? She is very serious, very peering into the soul of the person she's interviewing. And I don't know how to explain this, but IFPs, especially ISFPs, have this look often like they're deer. Like not like deer in the headlights, but just like a gentle doe in the forest looking at you. It's a very strong impression. You'll notice here she has a lot of gestures. So that is an ISP thing, is to use your body a lot. They're very unilateral and they're very intentional. Notice how when she puts her hand up here, like in that stop motion right here, she really hits it, okay? It's not like flowing through and her fingers are doing just whatever. She really hits that stop. You see what I'm saying? ISFPs are great dancers because they're very good at like that, like one jerky movement that's very intentional. And you notice also that she's being repetitive here, right? She's repetitive in her motions, but they're not like like the ENTPs ones were. They're like hada, 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 that pace of repetition to punctuate probably what she's speaking about. Hada, hada. And now in reverse. Hada, hada. With any ISP, you'll notice a lot that they're that they stick to a theme for a long point. So she's, you know, now she's changing course and she's moving her hand in the opposite way, but it's still the same theme. It's an ISP thing. I notice her foot here. She's doing a kind of repetitive gesture, but look how precise that is. It's that same gesture, back and forth and back and forth, and her foot is going to hitting the exact same mark back and forth. You're not going to find that with an EN. That kind of precision in their gestures. And again, it's a much slower rate than you would find with an extrovert. Let's listen to her voice a bit, because one thing you're going to notice about ISFPs is that they have very gentle, soft voices in general. The stereotypical Michael Jackson voice, he's ISFP, of course, is an ISFP voice. So listen to her voice here.
Because I think in this moment, there's a lot of people that are really comfortable, that have been really comfortable for a very long time. And
so you hear that, like, that softness. And you'll also find that with ISFJs, but it's definitely very, very common with ISFPs. Look at her with those lips. That's a very good tell. And the soft doe eyes. I wonder if you have any idea what causes the eyes to look like soft doe eyes. Please do let me know, because I'm not sure what the physical components of that look are. Okay, something about the way she just looked over at her interviewer, or whoever that is an ISFP look to me. Let me see if I can get back to it. Right there. Let's see if I can get it back. Right there. I don't know why. It might be something about how she doesn't turn her head the whole way to look at him. So she understands that I'm just speculating here, she understands that her audience is in front of her, but she's addressing this person, probably answering a question he asked. So she indicates who she's addressing with her eyes while keeping her face and her body directed at the audience, who's the primary reason she's speaking. That's what I would speculate for that. That's a feeler thing, but something about the way she looked gave me a strong ISFP vibe. All right, let's move on to our next ISFP. We've got here Charlie Chaplin, the famous Charlie Chaplin. This is from when he was an older man, a video within his house. Okay, so I want you to notice already right away, he's got these like slower, kind of muted movements, very contained. You know, compare him to Richard Feynman, who was like splayed. I wonder if I can show you. No, I closed it. Sorry, but you can go back if you like in the video. Who was kind of like splayed out, melting into the couch. Notice how he's very confined in his chair. It's all in this one small space. He even could spread out more, and he doesn't. And again, also notice, I'm not going to say that ISFPs are super aligned. They can often be a little bit like crooked at an angle, but they are capable of being aligned, especially if they want to portray this kind of like soft, muted, cocooned vibe. Like he is now. He's relaxed and quiet. And so you'll notice the alignment with the head, down the spine, down the body. It's all a straight line there. His slow movements. Now look at that. Look at those eyes pop up. He knows who he's talking to. He's portraying himself like a you know, oh, just a kindly old grandfather relaxed in his home, and yet he knows where the cameras are, right? ISFPs always know who they're talking to, who they're listening to. Now look at him. He's gesturing a little bit here, maybe fidgeting a little bit, but compare that to some of the ENTPs we saw how much they were fidgeting and all their whole body, and his body is just completely still except for just the little finger movements, little taps there. That seems very ISP to me, especially ISFP. ISFPs are going to be less rhythmic in general than ISTPs. They're going to be a bit more I don't know, like some kind of like animal, rather like a I know, mouse or something, like that little, like, how do you explain it? They're not intentionally creating a rhythm, right? They're more like, it's a more natural, that's a good way to say it, a more natural rhythm, more like water flowing, or a mouse. It's less logical, if you can say it in that way. Right, so we have him walking here. He's an old man, he has a walking cane, and yet his balance is better than Monica Potter's was when she was coming out. He's look at how straight his body is up and down. He's very capable of maintaining his body in a certain posture despite presumably his muscle weakness or whatever is causing him to need the cane. You'll notice that he is a bit tubby, and that is something that is I was like making sure it's the same person. Yes, that's still him, right? Okay. I was like, oh no, what if I'm describing someone else? Yeah, so you'll notice that ISFPs can get quite tubby, quite round, although generally their default state is that kind of thin, noodly state. But of course, everyone gains weight as they age. When ISFPs gain weight, though, it's almost always this kind of like tubby, roundness, but it's still soft. It's not you're not going to see like the super bloated, like tight stretched bellies and stuff as much. It's going to be kind of a softer like, you know, mama bear roundness. All right, let's move on. Here is Brianna Joy Gray. She's, oh, I should have let you hear. Let's let you hear Charlie Chaplin speaking. He has a wonderful voice when he was younger, especially.
Schopenhauer said happiness is a negative state, but I disagree. For that, I have the good fortune.
Modesty forbids.
It's decidedly clever.
Modesty forbids.
You can speak?
My mother used to sing this to me.
Yeah, so it's hard to get him speaking, but you see it's a very soft, gentle, that kind of tone of voice. And quite, you know, not super talkative.
A little bit faint. It's the feeling I feel.
Do you hear what I mean about the Michael Jackson voice? All right, so now let's move on to Brianna Joy Gray. She was she worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign. She's I don't know exactly what her position is, but basically she works in politics. Listen to her voice. You can hear some of that softness.
There's a gap between the kinds of issues that motivate individuals in their personal lives and would also motivate them to want to come out to the polls. You know, I spoke.
So this is very good because she's, again, a creative, of course, so that's going to mitigate it some, but she's speaking loud. She's speaking authoritatively. That's her job. She's, you know, she's not a celebrity that wants to have a particular image about herself. She wants to talk about a cause. So she's speaking with more force. And yet her forceful speaking is very quiet and sweet.
Yeah, I think there's a gap between the kinds of issues that motivate individuals in their personal lives and would also motivate them to want to come out to the polls. You know, I spoke to one woman at church this morning who said, you know, I have a personal relationship with...
You can see what I mean. And you can also notice here, we have that again, single gesture, repeated, same thing, over and over, over and over, over and over, and very slow, gentle. Look at her fingers. These fingers are not flopping around. Even as she moves her hand, moves her wrist, her fingers are being controlled. They're not flopping with the effects of gravity. So that's something that indicates to me sensing. The contained body, again, she has that kind of like thin, noodly body, is an IP thing, but she's has too much of this kind of control in her. Look at how when she moves her, I'm like impressed by it, how when she moves her arm, the whole hand and arm remain in line with one another. Do you see that? Isn't that yeah, so I don't know what to call that exactly, like it's not symmetry, but you know how it's straight. It's not crooked. That's definitely something that you're going to be really hard to find with an intuitive. Now the interesting thing about ISFPs, and again we mentioned that these are creative, so you're going to see it more with them than with others. But I do notice that she is moving her eyes quite a lot. Now, they're not to many different positions, right? She's looking at the presenter, and then she's kind of looking down here, and then she has one thing where she kind of looks up a little bit there, right there. So she has about 3 positions that she's cycling through. But it's not like some other sensors that just stare straight the whole time. That would be like an ISFJ or an ESTJ, maybe SJs, that's more common. It's she is cycling between them. That might be a P thing. But they are very limited in range and a number of where she's sending her gaze to. Notice her softness of her, oh, look at that nod. Oh, it's so hard because there's like, you know, a million tells a minute. This kind of like understanding nod. Yeah, that's definitely a feeler thing. If I saw that in someone, I would say almost certainly ISFP or ENFJ. Yeah, especially the like, hudun. That again, we're getting ISFP. I don't think you could get that really anywhere else. Let's look one more time. Hudun. Yeah, there we go. I was going to point out the softness of her upper eyelid, how it's very relaxed. It's not pulled back tight. And look, you can see even here in the corners of the mouth, a little bit of that. She's not doing it strongly, but she's got a little bit of that pursing with the centers pushed out and the corners tightened just a little bit. I was going to say the eyes are FI, the lips, of course, are ISFP specifically. Oh, did you see that little flash in her eyebrows right there? Yeah, a little bit. She's surprised, but that is not like how Richard Feynman was surprised with his eyebrows all straight up and his eyes super wide. No, it's a tiniest little flash. She doesn't want to betray too much that she wasn't expecting what the person said. Okay. Yeah, at this point, like, did you see how she looked at her? Let's see if I can show it, right? She looks away and then she glances over. Did you see it right there? She looks away. That glance right there. I don't know why that look is so ISFP to me. Right there. Did you see it? It's really fast. It's hard to catch. When her eyes are closed and then she glances over. Here. Yeah. That is such an ISFP look. I don't know why exactly. Okay. Also, I noticed her body right here with the hands up, and then she kind of adjusts herself slightly, and it has something of a Disney princess vibe to it. Let's see if we can find it. And then it's like, right here. So you see, it's it might be too subtle even for average people to see, but right in that little moment, she looks like, I was going to say Amy Adams in Enchanted, but Amy Adams is also ISFP, so I guess that probably has something to do with it. I think it's very interesting. So here I want to talk to you about the difference between structural and postural effects. Brianna Joy Gray has quite puffy lips, and then you'll also notice that she has, I don't know how to say this exactly, but quite prominent teeth. Her lips and her teeth naturally are a little bit more prominent. They're not like sunken in or anything. And yet you notice that if you notice how she holds her mouth is what's important. I paused on that thing when she opened like that, but notice how she keeps her mouth, her lips pursed like this, the corners pulled in. And if you listen to her voice, you're not going to hear any lisp.
And I've been here, fewer than 24 hours at this point.
It's like the opposite of a lisp. It's very contained, pulled back in. So that's how you can know partly that she does not have strong any.
A striking fact of my...
I would guess that even though she's probably creative, she's probably ESP creative, her subtype. Just watching, but I'd have to watch more to know for sure. All right, and let's do our last ISFP, and that is...
How are you doing? How's the family doing?
They're doing great. We've actually just come back from a ski trip, which was nice, which we try to do annually.
So I'm going to guess he's an EJ subtype. He's got that kind of, how would you put it? Like a bossy, put together vibe, less relaxed and kooky.
which was
but you can still hear in his voice there's a softness, a kind of a raspy breathiness, maybe would be a good way to put it. Lower volume.
Which we try to do annually. But I found that actually you get to a certain age and you obviously just try to compete, especially when I've got.
Can you hear the breathiness and so on?
I've got young sons.
Okay. So let's see. I noticed he has a little bit of a cheeky look here. That's something that you can see in ISFPs alongside other types. That right there, I don't know how to describe it. That like kind of shrug. That one. I don't know why, but I would be more likely to type someone as ISFP if I saw that. Some of these faster gestures are really hard to describe clearly. There was like kind of a slow, how can I put it, like a smooth movement. Watch his facial transition in this moment. Let's see if I can find it. Right there. That was it. I went back too far. I'll point out, if you look at the spine and the head, they're quite aligned. The shoulders are quite squared. This kind of, I don't know how to put it nicely, but like kind of a prissy way of sitting. Pulled in, contained. Of course, the legs crossed like this is kind of a European thing, so you don't want to make too much of that, but it is very contained. He's not taking up the full space available to him, and that's definitely an IP thing. And the fact that it's so aligned, so thin, it's very ISP, especially ISFP, because he's got that gentle kind of natural movement. It's not tick, 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 you know. Okay, let's see if there's anything else that I notice. That look over, that kind of like peering into the soul of the interviewer thing. I wish I had more precise language that I could explain how you can see the difference, but hopefully at least any feelers listening to this will have kind of an instinctive understanding of that. Again, you're going to notice the softness of the eyes. He's not stretching his eyelids open. Yeah, okay. All right, so hopefully I've given you, again, if you want me to do more ISFP analysis, let me know and I can do more. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 3 mystery people, and I want to see if you can use some of what we've talked about to type them yourself. And of course, you're just beginning probably, and it takes practice to get better. But here's a way that you can test. So first I'm going to play the voice just so you can get that aspect of it.
Totally 180'd, right? Because before, I mean, we kind of covered some like loose politics on my show, Think Tank. Obviously, the Young Turks is known for politics, but we kind of...
Okay, so that should be enough. You can replay it if you need to. Okay, and then let's watch. Again, pay attention to the spine, the hand movements, the eyes, and the mouth. The things we talked about there. Okay, notice, how is her spine looking? How is she holding her mouth? What is she doing with her eyes? How often is she changing her gaze? Into how many positions? How are her eyes held? Skip past this girl. How is she looking at this lady? What are her gestures like? How symmetrical are they? Is she returning to a theme, or is she moving a lot? Is she shifting a lot in her seat? Does she seem uncomfortable? Is she taking up more room or less room than she could with her chair? Look at her. Let's skip. Let's see. Look at her facial expressions. Is she changing her mood often? How is she interacting with the woman across from her? Does she seem like she's having kind of an emotional reaction with her, or is she more focused on the logic of what she's saying? Okay, so hopefully you've been able to tell by now. This is Hannah Cranston, political commentator. She's an ISFP. She's an ISFP. All right, let's look at our next mystery person.
Hi, I'm Paul Ray.
First, I'll give you a chance to listen to his voice.
Hi, I'm Paul Ray, and I'm here at the Sutter Home Vibe and Vine Green Room. We try to stay as busy as possible. I think we're the third largest export when it comes to music in general in the world, and per capita we're #1 because we're such a small country.
All right, so there's his voice. Let's watch his body. Pay attention to his eye movements, his eyebrows and forehead, his mouth. Is it pursed in or is it relaxed? Look at how he holds his head and his shoulders. Are they squared? Are they aligned? Is his spine straight in line with his head? Let's look at his body. Is he taking up less or more space than he needs to? Let's go back a little. Let's look at his hand movements. How symmetrical are those hands? How tightly held are those fingers? How often does he change gestures? Check out his eyes. What is he doing with his eyes here? How jittery is he? What is this? Look at this face he makes right here. Right here. What does that look like? All right, so the answer is Paul Ray is an ENTP. He's an ENTP. He actually reminds me a lot of Stephen Strait, the first guy we looked at. They have a similar vibe to me. I think they probably are a similar subtype, as well as being this close in generation and so on. All right, did you get that one right? All right, the last one is a toughie. I chose her on purpose because it might be hard to tell for the average person, especially if you're not using visual tells. So if you're just thinking about personality, it might be hard for someone to tell. So we've got Yolandi from the band Die Antwoord. And first I'm going to let you listen to her voice. She's screaming here, but maybe you can still get an indication.
Bitch, we can all hear you and you suck! Jesus! Bitch!
Let's see if we can get her talking normal.
Bit of the old Jessie.
You sounded exactly like Jessie there.
I think you're just gonna keep quiet now.
Maybe.
Okay, so that's her speaking, and now let's watch her movement. So check out her spine. Check out her eyes, her hands, her wrists. How aligned are they? What is she doing with her fingers? Watch how she picks up the cup. Does it look like she has a lot of control in her movements, or does it look like she's letting gravity do half the work? What are her eyes like? How relaxed or open are they? How jittery is she? And how purposeful? Okay, that one was short, so I'm going to show it to you one more time. How often is she changing her gestures? Watch the rhythm of her swaying here. Look at her body type, her arms and her body. I didn't talk a lot about ENTP bodies. I can maybe do that in a future video. Look at her mouth, how she holds her mouth. Get that cup out of the way. All right, so Yolandi is ISFP. She is indeed. All right, I hope this was helpful for you. Please let me know if you have any questions or want more explanations about anything I said. And definitely let me know if you noticed any interesting movements or other visual tells and would like my, my thoughts or opinions on them. And also let me know what type would you like me to do next. We can add another type or two. And increase our repertoire of types that we can visually identify. And let me know how you did. How many out of 3 did you get of the last people? It would help me to know how well I'm explaining the visual tells I see. So yeah, please do leave a comment, and I hope you enjoyed. All right, bye.